Hi, everybody, and welcome to ExamRevision's Leaving Cert Higher Level Maths 2023 exam tips and predictions video. If you find today's video useful, just to let you know that we will be running a May revision online course for all of our Leaving Cert students and Junior Cert students as well. And the Maths Leaving Cert Higher Level course will be taking place on the 17th of May. So if you do find today's video useful and you'd like a bit more support in the run up to the exams, you can check out examrevision.ie for all the details on that revision course and all the other ones that we'll be running as well. So let's get straight into some important tips and predictions for you guys for this year's exams. So I'm sure you're all familiar at this stage with the adjustments for the 2023 paper. So just to run through them again, just to make sure you're happy, what you guys need to be aware of is on both paper 1 and paper 2, as you know, the exam is split up into section A and section B. Both are worth 150 marks this year. And for section A, you'll be given 6 questions, all worth 30 marks each, and you will have to do 5 of those questions. So you'll be able to leave out 1 question in section A. And again, they'll be similar to previous years in what was examined in section A's. And then moving on to section B, which is your context and applications. Again, it's worth 150 marks. There is going to be 4 questions, all 50 marks each, and you guys will have to do 3 of them, again, amounting to 150. So you will be able to leave 1 question out of section B. So nice and easy to remember for this year. You go into your paper 1 and your paper 2, and you know you can leave out 1 question in section A and 1 question in section B. So again, that's kind of something to be really aware of when you're doing your revision as well, to decide where you're going to be putting your focus. I would say this year I would be recommending trying to cover the entire course, rather than leaving out an entire topic. Or if you are going to leave out a topic, do make sure you're being clever with which one you're leaving out. So what I'm going to show you now is, I'll actually come back to that in a second, just a quick breakdown of the different topics that have come up on paper 1 and paper 2 in the past. So just to show you this quickly, if you said to me, oh, I'm thinking about leaving out differentiation and integration, for example, I'd be saying to you, that's a terrible decision, because if we look here, differentiation and integration are all the light blue words here, and you can see they do feature heavily on paper 1. So that would certainly be a topic that I would be very reluctant to leave out. The same with the likes of algebra and functions, sequence and series, etc. They do appear quite frequently. So look, you and your teachers will know best with what you're deciding to cover. But if you are going to leave out a topic, do make sure you're comfortable that, it could come up more than once, and be aware of where it would potentially show up. Some people suggested to me complex numbers is one that you could leave out. But what I would say about complex numbers is, generally speaking, it's quite a nice question. And, it's kind of almost a guaranteed section A question. So again, depending on if you like complex numbers or not, that could be one that would be less common to come up as a section B, for example. But as I said, it generally speaking would be quite a nice question. So you don't necessarily want to be getting rid of something like that. But again, you and your teachers will know best when you're deciding what you want to focus your attention on. So again, this is something that you might want to pause the video and screenshot and use to help you with your own revision. So that's what comes up generally on paper 1. So again, you can see, if we look at the section B's, so that's questions 7 to 10, we can see that functions features really heavily. Differentiation, integration, sequence and series, they would be the ones that we would commonly see coming up on section B. And I would say there's a strong chance that maybe financial maths might come up as a section B this year, given that it hasn't come up as a section B in a number of years, and we haven't seen it come up as on the paper in a few years. So that could be certainly something to keep an eye out on for this year's paper. Moving on to paper 2 then, this is our breakdown. So again, you can maybe screenshot this, keep it when you're doing your revision, to see what types of things that you can expect when you open up paper 2. I suppose really importantly, we can see that the likes of statistics and probability I have highlighted in kind of the dark blue, they come up a lot in both section A and section B. We can see trigonometry in green is also very much a section A and a section B question. And we have the likes likes of the line and the circle, which generally come up as a section A question. So again, that just gives you an idea of what to expect when you open the paper. You know, we all know that generally speaking, we can't predict what's going to come up in each question on the Leaving Cert Maths in relation to the order, but you can see there's slight patterns. But who's to say it's going to be like that this year? We just don't know. But you can certainly break down your study when you are going through different topics and make sure you are completing a mixture of section A and section B questions. So just going back here then to a few quick exam tips for you all. Again, these are all pretty straightforward. Most of them you will have heard before, but just to remind yourselves. So again, revise the basics, get help now. So make sure you're confident doing things like solving quadratics, factorizing, those kind of, I suppose, straightforward things that you probably don't spend a lot of time completing in class. Make sure you're able to do those going into your Leaving Cert exam, so that you're not coming to a question thinking, oh, I'm not sure I know how to finish this question because I haven't gone back over a simultaneous equation or something like that. So just do make sure you're going back over those basics now. Make sure you're reading your question carefully. Are you being asked to factorize, solve? Are you being asked to show that the answer is a particular thing? Make sure you're aware of what you're actually being asked to figure out in the question. Remember the importance of attempt marks. We all know how important they are. And one small point I would say on that is if you're using a formula, let's say a formula that you've gotten from your formula tables, do make sure that you substitute into that formula. A lot of the time on the higher level Leaving Cert paper, you will only get attempt marks if you do some correct substitution into a formula. So do make sure that if you decide to use a formula, even if you don't know everything that needs to be subbed into that formula, even if maybe you only know 1 point instead of 2 points, or you only know a point and you don't know the slope, just substitute that in anyway, and that should help you to get some attempt marks. Don't assume later questions have most marks. A lot of the time, actually, it's the other way around, that the A and B's part might actually carry more marks, but you don't need to get bogged down with that in the exam. We won't know until after the exam what the marks are going to be allocated. So basically, have a look at a question, and just because you can't do the very last part of the exam question, don't assume that that's going to be worth the most. You might actually pick up most of the marks through the other part of the question. So we know that each paper is worth 300 marks. You're going to have 2.5 hours per paper. So as a rough guide for timings, and again, this is a rough estimate, but I'd be kind of recommending divide the amount of marks by 2. So your 30 markers in section A, I'm saying about 15 minutes, and then it's slightly less than divided by 2 then for your section Bs, I'm saying about 20 minutes. Again, if you went a couple of minutes over, that would be fine. And the reason I've kind of given you this as a kind of an estimate would be to give yourself a little bit of time at the start of the exam to read through the paper. And the reason why I've allocated about 5 to 10 minutes for that is just because you have a choice. So other years that mightn't have been as important because you didn't have a choice. You just kind of had to get stuck in and just get through it. Whereas you guys will be able to leave out a question in each section. So it definitely could be worth spending a couple of minutes reading through so that you don't end up spending 15 minutes on a question and not having time to do another one that you actually were more confident at. So make sure you're tracking your time spent per question and move on and mark to return later. So if you're really stuck on a question, don't spend, 40 minutes on it. Do your 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And if you're done, move on and come back to it then at a later stage if you have the time. If you use a calculator, do try and show the calculations on the paper. So obviously you don't need to put every single thing on the paper that you're putting into your calculator, but do for the most part try and show the examiner where you're going. Don't just do it all out on your calculator and write the answer. Make sure you're using your formula booklet. Obviously in your Leaving Cert, the examiners will be leaving them for you to use. Do use them. There's such a wealth of knowledge in those formula tables, and it might not be the actual formula that you don't know. It's more that you might forget. So by you opening up a formula table on a particular page and seeing, oh yeah, the perpendicular distance formula, I forgot about that. Let's see, will that help me in this question? Do draw sketches to help yourself visualize, and particularly on the shape questions. I always find those and the kind of line and circle questions, they're so valuable to draw your sketches. Watch out for your minus signs. Again, the top students I come across make silly mistakes where they forget to put a minus in a bracket. And when they square it, then the calculator doesn't change it into a positive. So just be really careful with your minuses and make sure you're putting your brackets around them. Do a common sense check with your answers, if at all possible. Make sure the answer kind of makes sense in the context of the question, and ensure you have implemented the correct degree of accuracy and included units. So make sure you're rounding it to the correct amount of decimal places or significant figures, and do make sure that you're including the units at the end as well. So again, this is just a quick topic breakdown of the topics that you're going to see most frequently coming up on paper 1 and on paper 2. Again, as we know, there is a chance that some elements may appear on either paper. So for example, the likes of area and volume, Pythagoras' theorem, has been seen to come up on paper 1 as well. So this is more of an overarching guide, but don't be surprised if you see little snippets of paper 2 on paper 1 and vice versa. So we've already gone through our breakdown. So moving on, I'm just going to run through a few predictions or more common sense notes for you guys to be aware of on the different areas that I would see having a slightly more probable chance of coming up on your paper in 2023. As I'm sure you're aware, it's difficult to make predictions for the Leaving Cert course for maths because so much content does feature on the exam each year. So it's not like maybe certain other subjects where you're writing an essay on a particular thing and you can see more of a breakdown each year of where different things are going to come up. But what I've done is I've gone through the last number of years of the Leaving Cert, and I've tried to look out for things that come up quite frequently, but also maybe things that haven't appeared in the last few years that might have a stronger chance of coming up. And as we always say, these are just kind of ideas. This is just something that I've done myself. And, like anything, use it with caution. Certainly don't just look at these things, but maybe the night before the exam, you could focus in your attention a little bit more on a few of these suggestions. So for algebra and functions, some of the things that I would say is important to be aware of would be, of course, the factor theorem. So we know the factor theorem features very heavily each year on the exam. So that would be something I would be making sure that you know how to do. The next thing is make sure you're happy with your inequalities, particularly maybe rational inequalities. I think maybe has a chance of coming up this year, since we haven't seen it come up since 2018, I believe. So that could be something within the inequalities section that you might just focus in on a little bit more the night before the exam. Logs and indices come up nearly every year, surprisingly, and they're definitely a topic that students maybe don't like. But if you actually look back through the last number of years of exams, between the algebra chapters and between maybe differentiation and integration, logs and indices feature quite heavily. So do look back over the last few years just to even become familiar with how they come up, within a functions question, or as I said, some of your differentiation and integration. Something that I did notice was algebraic fractions as its own standalone question hasn't come up since 2019. So obviously it features within other questions, but as a standalone question, it hasn't come up in the algebra section A. So that could be something that may appear this year. Another thing that I think maybe has a chance of coming up this year is binomial expansion. It hasn't appeared on the Leaving Cert, so that could be something that we might see. Inverse functions is another thing that hasn't appeared on the Leaving Cert in a number of years. So that could be something within the functions chapter to look back over. And then proof by contradiction hasn't appeared since 2019, where we were proving by contradiction root 2. So is an irrational number. So again, that could be something that you might want to look at. That's your algebra and functions, some areas that I think might be worthwhile focusing in on. Moving on then to sequences and series. What I would say about sequences and series is, as I showed you earlier in the breakdown, it does come up nearly every year as part of section A and section B in some capacity. So I would definitely make sure you're confident and look back over the section B questions on sequences and series, since it does feature so heavily each year. What I did notice was nearly every year I looked back over the last maybe 6 years, geometric sequence series has literally come up every single year. So again, make sure you've looked back over that. Arithmetic sequences has come up the last 2 years. So potentially maybe something like a quadratic could come up this year. Again, who knows, but it hasn't come up. A quadratic hasn't come up since 2020. So I suppose if they were trying to give you something a little bit different, arithmetic has come up the last 2 years. It could, of course, come up again this year. But again, it could be a quadratic maybe that's hasn't appeared for the last 2 exam years. Moving on then to proof by induction, it wasn't actually examined last year. So, we could say maybe there's a stronger chance of it coming up this year. Given that divisibility and your series has come up the last 2 years, potentially we might look at an inequality coming up for you guys this year. Or another thing that hasn't come up since 2018 is proof of De Moivre's theorem. Now, obviously, De Moivre's links with complex numbers, but its proof is done by proof by induction. So that's why I put it in there. So again, if I was going to pick out of all the induction stuff that could come up, I'd be saying inequalities or proof of De Moivre's theorem would be the most probable out of the kind of 4 areas. Moving on then to complex numbers. De Moivre's theorem comes up literally every single year, so you need to make sure you know how to do that. Solving equations using De Moivre's. So that's where we, write the complex number in polar form and general polar form. We apply De Moivre's and then we substitute in our 0, 1 or 2 or depending on how many solutions our equation has. That comes up kind of every second year. So it didn't come up last year. So there's a chance it might come up for you guys this year. Something that hasn't come up in as kind of a full question since 2016, and it was a really nice question actually, was the conjugate root theorem, and where you're asked to find the roots where they have complex coefficients. So basically our conjugate root theorem is where if a equation has a complex root and it has real coefficients, so basically the numbers in front of your z squared and z are real numbers, your a, b, and c are real numbers, then you can use the conjugate root theorem to find the other root. It's just changing the sign of the imaginary part. But in this exam question, so I'd recommend having a look at it. They got you to use the conjugate root theorem in part A, and then in part B, I believe they then got you to find the root of a function, but it actually had complex coefficients. So you couldn't use the conjugate root theorem. You had to go about it another way. So I think that would be a good one just to throw your eyes over, because it could be a nice one to come up. Something that hasn't really featured on the Leaving Cert is, obviously your Argand diagram, but actually plotting and looking at transformations of how, multiplying by I, how that affects a complex number on the Argand diagram, or how multiplying it by, a whole number or a fraction changes it and what happens to it. So I think, again, that would be something to look at. And also, as I mentioned on the last slide, proof of De Moivre's theorem as well, I think has a chance of coming up for you guys. Moving on then to differentiation. Look, differentiation features so heavily, and integration obviously features so heavily on the Leaving Cert every year. So it wouldn't be necessarily leaving anything out. It would be more just making sure you're really happy with finding turning points or stationary points and max and min. Again, comes up nearly every single year. Make sure you're happy with how to differentiate trig functions. Again, that features nearly every year. Make sure you know how to differentiate logs, indices, and and rates of change. Make sure you're happy how to tackle those related rates of change questions, particularly in our section B area. Moving on to integration then, I think maybe something to do with maybe the trapezoidal rule could feature for you guys. Linking that with the area under a curve. Again, the area under a curve or the area between two curves comes up quite a lot. So that could be something. And also the average value features very frequently over the last number of years. So make sure you're happy with the formula that we use for the average value, as it's a nice question when it does come up, if you're happy with that formula. And then finally, for paper 1, financial maths. So as I mentioned previously, financial maths hasn't actually featured that heavily on the exam over the last number of years, but it hasn't come up as a section B question for a good few years. So if you're looking at financial maths questions, do make sure you look back over some of the section B questions, as I think it would have a good chance coming up this year, and particularly as a section B question. So what I'm going to do now, before we go on to some of the predictions and tips for paper 2, I just want to talk to you about the website examrevision.ie and just explain to you, if you are interested in this video, you found helpful, what you might like to look at on our website. So if you do want to, I suppose, learn more and discover more about the Leaving Cert Maths course, we do have the entire maths course done out in video presentations that you can look at. So I'm going to just take you to the website really quickly, as it might be something that you would find useful in the run-up to your exams. So let me just share the screen with you here. So if you do sign up to a premium account on the website, this is what you're going to see, okay? So you can see here, you can pick your subject. So I've just picked higher level Leaving Cert Maths, and you can see we have our video tutorials. So if I click in here to the video tutorials, you'll see we have the course split up into the different strands. So we've got algebra, stats and probability, geometry and trig, number and functions. So even if you sign up as just a free user on the website, so you don't need to pay any money, and if you click in here to algebra, and you click into this folder, algebraic expressions, equations, inequalities, and graphs, this folder is available free of charge for everybody who signs up to the website as a free user. So even if you wanted to do a little bit of a recap, for example, on solving rational inequalities, as I mentioned, I think that may have a chance of coming up this year for you guys. You can click in here and you'll be brought to our video. You can play the video, and I'll just mute it there, and you'll see the step-by-step explanation coming up there for you. So if that was maybe something that you've forgotten how to do, you'll be able to see our teacher going through it in detail, and that one is actually looking at the 2018 exam question. So as I said to you, even if that's something that you would just like to throw your eyes over, you can look at that free of charge, and all of these videos on our Leaving Cert Maths Algebra are available to you guys free of charge. If you sign up as a user, then you will get access to all the other areas of the course. So for example, if you want to maybe look at something else that I've mentioned earlier, maybe complex numbers, you can go into our let's say proof by induction. So you can go in here to our number folder, go into proof by induction, and you'll see the videos that I've done on proof by induction. So I think out of all of them for you guys this year that have a good chance coming up maybe would be inequalities for proof by induction, or proof of De Moivre's theorem. And again, you can click in there and you'll be brought to the video. If you sign up as a premium user, you'll also have access to all of our videos, notes, and PowerPoint presentations. You'll see they're all available there for you. I'll just click into one of our notes just to show you, and it takes you through the kind of main areas in each of your sections. So that's just something in case you're interested. You can log on to examrevision.ie and sign up as a free user just to kind of get a feel for the different areas. The other thing just to show you as well is the different subjects we have available on the website. So for junior cycle, we have business, geography, history, home ec, Irish, maths and science. And obviously for our Leaving Cert students, then for you guys, we have ag science, biology, business, chemistry, economics, English, French, geography, history, Irish, maths for both higher and ordinary level, music, PE and physics. So that might be useful. And remember, we have a free kind of area in each of those available to you. If you'd like to access any of our past revision courses, you can actually click in here by past revision courses, but also our May revision courses will be coming up. So you'll be able to go in here and book on to any of our upcoming May revision courses for the Leaving Cert as well. Okay, so I'll go back to my PowerPoint now, and I'm going to talk you through the tips that I have for you for our paper 2. But before I do that, actually, I nearly forgot the most important part. If you would like to sign up to any premium plans on the website, you can use this discount code, which will get you 20% off our premium plans. So it's 2023 tips. And again, you can use that for any subject on the website. Our subscriptions are paid monthly. So, you can obviously just sign up for a month or two in the run up to your Leaving Cert exams and obviously cancel then. So it's something that should be quite useful for you guys coming up to your Leaving Cert exams. So moving on then to paper 2, some tips and kind of hints that might be useful for you guys when you're doing your study for paper 2. So if we start with probability, again, a lot of the same things come up on probability each year. So do make sure you're just happy with how to calculate probabilities using your fractions. And do have a look over the last number of years. Something that hasn't come up for a few years is permutations and factorials. So do throw your eyes back over how permutations work and, where the order is important. So you're trying to figure out how many different options you have for each seat, let's say, in your question. So throw your eyes back over those. Tree diagrams also haven't come up since 2017, I believe. Now, obviously, you can use tree diagrams to help you with questions, but it hasn't kind of featured as a standalone kind of question in a number of years. Venn diagrams come up very frequently with probabilities. I think 2020 was the last time, but they do kind of, again, feature quite frequently. So I would say that would be a good one to look back over. Make sure you're happy with how to calculate your different probabilities. If you're asked to prove, let's say, independent events, if two events are conditional or using conditional probabilities, I should say, mutually exclusive, all those different terms, make sure you're happy with those. And then Bernoulli trials do come up quite frequently also. So I would definitely recommend being comfortable with your Bernoulli trials and how they work in probabilities. Then moving on to statistics, and I've just kind of included your inferential statistics in there. I think maybe obviously normal distribution, 100%, you guys need to know that. It comes up absolutely every year in some capacity. So make sure you know normal distributions, standard normal distributions, Z-scores. And I think maybe the empirical rule could feature maybe as a section A question this year. It has obviously featured last year. So do, I suppose, have a look back over those and just see how they link together. Looking then at the other kind of things, which I think definitely could continue to come up, which they do every single year, really, in some shape or form, is your confidence interval and your hypothesis testing. So what I would say for that one is your confidence interval and your hypothesis testing. They can come up in two different ways. They come up with either your mean or your proportion. So make sure you're happy with the breakdown between the two of those, because when they come up, you need to read the question and know, am I creating a confidence interval for the population mean, or am I creating one for the population proportion? And once you get that figured out in your head, it's a lot easier. So again, make sure you're happy with your Z scores, your confidence intervals, because they do feature pretty much every year on the Leaving Cert, particularly in your section Bs, where we know we can pick up a lot of marks. Moving on then to trigonometry. Again, trig has a lot of stuff that comes up every year because it does feature in both section A and section B. So make sure you know your sine rule, your cosine rule, how to find the area of a triangle using your trig formula, Pythagoras' theorem. Area and volume comes up a lot within your trigonometry, and obviously functions. So trig kind of permeates other areas of the curriculum. So do make sure you're happy with those. Again, pay particular attention to the section Bs. You're guaranteed for it to come up, to be honest, in section B. And the last few years, it's come up in two different questions between using, let's say, your cosine rule, your sine rule, area of a triangle, and then it's also mixed in with other, obviously, trig functions questions where you might be doing a bit of differentiation and stuff like that. 3D trig is another one that I'd say to have a look at, and look at the kind of the past questions on that. Again, something that could come up this year is transformations of trig graphs, looking at how the trig graph moves around and different things affect it. And then again, a proof comes up quite frequently. Last year, it came up the year before it came up. I think last year, I think was to do with tan, if I'm not mistaken. This, or the year before, it was cos 2a. Maybe proof of sine or cosine rule is something that I haven't seen come up. So again, that's just a kind of a random guess of something that might feature. Moving on then to the line and the circle, your perpendicular distance formula is something that hasn't come up. It didn't come up last year, but it does come up quite frequently. So again, a good chance could come up for you guys. I would just make sure you're happy with your orthocenter, your centroid, your circumcenter, because it's something that featured kind of on some of the sample papers, but there hasn't been loads of questions linked with those things as kind of a crossover between, you know, your constructions and the line and the circle. So it's just something maybe to have a look at. The same with the intersection of lines and circles. We haven't seen that in a few years. It could be something to throw your eyes back over. Obviously linked in with simultaneous equations. And then problem solving with GF and C, again, that comes up very frequently. So I throw my eyes back over the 2020, 2019, 2017 questions on that to make sure you're happy with how to problem solve, where they give you like 3 hints about a circle, and then you have to problem solve with GF and C to come up with the equation of the circle. And then finally, for geometry, again, you know, it's difficult to predict exactly what's going to feature because there is quite a lot, but given that a construction came up last year, I would say a theorem has a higher chance of coming up. And since theorem 13 came up the year before, you know, you could say maybe that theorem 11 or 12 would have a slightly higher chance of appearing. So again, who knows, but that could be worth, I suppose, focusing your attention in on. Similar triangles come up nearly every year in some shape or form in between like your area volume questions and your circle stuff and geometry. So definitely know how similar triangles work. And as always, look, every year there's some kind of, you know, length area volume question that's linked in with another topic in our section Bs. So make sure you're happy with your formulae for your spheres, your cones, your cylinders, and also with circles, arcs, sectors, all that stuff, because again, you never know how that's going to appear in a question. So yeah, hopefully that was useful, guys. As I said to you, if you are interested, we will be running our revision course for kind of the last minute revision in May. So do check out examrevision.ie if you'd like any more information on that. And as always, keep an eye out on our social media for any other tips on all your other subjects coming up, and also on our YouTube channel for other videos for other subjects. Thanks a million. And if you found our videos useful today, it would be great if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks, guys.